Hey everyone, welcome back to Ted Takes It Apart. In this video, I'm going to be showing you how to remove and replace those rusty fog light screws. You can get them from something like this to something like this. We're going to want to start by removing these two covers on either side of the fog light. They just require a Phillips head screwdriver and they can be removed very easily. With the two covers removed, you will see that there are 4 screws that hold the housing together. Over time, these screws get rusty and they seize. If you apply too much torque, they will strip, break, or even crack the plastic housing. The easiest way to remove these seized screws is to use a small drill bit to drill a small hole into the top of the screw until the cap comes off. Here are some of the screws that I drilled out and some that snapped because I applied too much torque. And here are a few that actually cooperated. They're still a bit rusty, but they came out just fine. With the screws either removed or drilled out, we can now separate the two halves of the housing. From here, you want to unplug the wires that run to the bulb. On the housing, there are 2 tabs you can reach in with your finger to pull out the seal. Now would be a good time to clean up or replace this seal. Here you can see the remnants of the screws we drilled out. These screws don't thread into the plastic, but instead brass inserts molded into the plastic housing. We'll need to remove the screws and the insert. The tool we'll be using to remove these brass inserts is a simple soldering iron. This one has a fine tip and it'll get just hot enough for us to start to melt the plastic ever so slightly so we can press those fittings out. There are several ways to remove these inserts as I'm showing here. In this one, we're either pressing the tip of the iron to the brass insert or holding it to the screw itself. This method takes quite a while to heat it up from the screw side because it dissipates heat so quickly. You can press it in from the bottom, but what you'll find is you run the risk of damaging the plastic ever so slightly. It's only cosmetic, but it doesn't look the best. Here you can see I'm attempting to heat the screw up and the brass insert at the same time while using a Q-tip to put force on the other end to pop it out. Here you can see me plunging it through the back just to press the brass insert out once it got hot enough. This worked, but it does damage the plastic ever so slightly. Removing the inserts from this face of the part is always much easier, and I highly recommend to do it whenever you can. Here you can see an example of the new hardware we'll be using. It consists of a brand new brass fitting, a hex head, stainless steel bolt, and a zinc plated washer. To install these new brass fittings, place the small end into the hole where the old fittings were. Use your soldering iron to press it slowly into the plastic housing. You'll want to go just past the surface, and a little plastic might bubble over the top of the surface, but you can use the soldering iron to pat it back down over the fitting to make sure it stays in place very well. After you've gotten all 4 in, you'll want to make sure that they're totally cool before you start putting everything back together. You want to make sure that those brass fittings are as seated as possible. Then you can put the seal back in and wire up the connectors to the bulb and line up the tabs with the housing, and you can start installing your hardware from here. Be careful not to over torque it. These really don't need to be much more than hand tight, and you definitely don't want to run the risk of spinning those fittings in the housing. You might have to restart and remelt them into the plastic. But here you can see them all installed. You can see where I burned it because I went from the back end. If you'd like to minimize the risk of causing cosmetic damage to the plastic housing, I recommend cutting every one of those screws flush to the surface of the housing. From there, you can use a drill bit to drill into the screw and into that brass insert. With that hole drilled, you should now be able to press the soldering iron in from the open face side, so there's less chance of you actually contacting any of that housing. That should make it much easier to remove while minimizing that chance of damage. Here's a full kit of hardware needed to remove and replace the old screws and inserts. I have assembled this kit to allow you to use new screws in old inserts or use the old screws in the new inserts if you decide not to replace them altogether. I have several of these kits for sale on eBay. If you want to save a lot of money to not have to replace the housings, there's a link in the description below. I hope the method I showed helps you to save a little time or money on your car. Thanks again for watching. Please like and subscribe.